Some cities move fast, some cities are loud and restless, but Washington DC feels different. Wide avenues, timeless buildings, and quiet corners that carry centuries of history. Come with me as we explore some fascinating stories, historic moments, and a few of the most remarkable places in the city. On our walk to the Washington Monument, the elegant historic buildings and open spaces made the city feel both grand and peaceful. On the way to the monument, we saw a large map board showing all the nearby landmarks. It's actually very helpful if you're visiting for the first time because many of the most famous places are located within walking distance. With just a short walk, you can explore several historical sites in one area. Look how the snow leaves soft patches across the ground, that making the whole place gently brighten the landscape and adding a quiet winter charm to the path. Did you know this monument was built to honor George Washington, who is the first president of the US? And it is the tallest stone monument in the world. In just a short walk from the monument is the World War II Memorial. This memorial honors the 16 million Americans who served during World War II. There are 56 pillars surrounding the memorial, each representing the US states and territories that supported the war effort during World War II. What makes this memorial especially striking is how thoughtfully everything is arranged. The open plaza, the fountains, and the circle of pillars create a space that feels both grand and reflective. At the center, two large arches stand for the Atlantic and Pacific theaters, the two major regions where the war was fought. From here, we walk toward the reflecting pool which stretches between the Washington Monument and the Lincoln Memorial. Usually, the monument reflects beautifully in the water, but because of the recent snow, the pool was actually frozen during our visit. Everything here is connected, one monument leading you gently to the next. The waterfront was peaceful and surprisingly, parts of the river were completely frozen. Even the kids were playing, throwing ice pieces across the surface. Did you know whales are mammals whose ancestors once moved from the ocean to land and millions of years later adapted and returned to life in the sea? Did you know this museum is one of the most visited natural history museums in the world? It holds more than 145 million specimens, from dinosaur fossils to rare gems like the famous Hope Diamond. On our last day, we stopped by the White House Visitor Center. One display shows how the White House evolved over time. One interesting detail we learned is that the White House has been expanded and renovated many times over the years to become the building we see today. The building was originally made of light-colored sandstone, but to protect it from the weather damage, it was painted white, which is how it eventually became known as the White House today. You know, the White House was actually rebuilt after being damaged during the War of 1812. Here we are in US Capitol Building, one of the most recognizable buildings in the country. The large dome and classical architecture make it one of the most impressive landmarks in Washington, D.C. One interesting detail about the Capitol is the massive dome above it, made of cast iron and weighing nearly 9 million pounds. From the Capitol, we continued walking toward the Library of Congress. At first, the directions on the map confused us a little, but once we finally found the entrance, it was absolutely worth it. Did you know this library founded in 1800 and it still adds thousands of new items to its collections every single day? Wow. The moment we stepped inside the Great Hall, the architecture was simply stunning. With its marble columns, grand staircases, detailed ceilings, and beautiful paintings, the entire space feels incredibly majestic. It almost felt like stepping into one of those magnificent halls you see in movies and those fantasy stories. When we finally reached the main reading room, the view from the balcony was truly breathtaking. You have to see that. The entire room opens beneath a magnificent dome with rows of wooden desks arranged in a perfect circle below. It's one of those spaces that instantly makes you pause and just take it all in. It is the largest library in the world, holding more than 170 million items, including books, maps, photographs, and historical recordings. And if all the shelves were placed end to end, they would stretch for over 800 miles. Did you know the main reading room raises about 160 feet to the top of the dome? And only researchers with special permission are allowed to work at the desks in this main reading room. The library receives millions of visitors every year who come to see its architecture and history collections. Wow, isn't that amazing? A great thing about visiting Washington DC is that many of the major museums here are completely free to enter, especially the Smithsonian museums. It makes the city a wonderful place to explore with family, where both kids and adults can learn something new. If you enjoy history like I do, the city is full of fascinating stories behind every monument and building. In fact, sometimes all it takes is a good historical story to make a place even more interesting to visit. So, if you ever have the chance, Washington DC is definitely a city worth exploring. And with that, our little journey through Washington DC comes to an end. Until the next adventure, tata for now.